From Olympic podiums to prison cells, Murray Riley defied every boundary, transforming from gold medal rower and decorated police officer into an international criminal mastermind. His influence stretched from Sydney's underworld to the American mafia, and together they established a trans-Pacific drug network that connected Australia to Southeast Asia and the United States. He helped mastermind a heroin operation using planes and false-bottom suitcases, with the Nugan Hand Bank laundering the profits. He smuggled over 4 tons of cannabis into Australia by sea and was even caught conspiring to defraud British Aerospace of £40 million through computer fraud. This is the story of Murray Riley. Murray Riley's life was defined by sharp contrasts: an Olympic athlete, a decorated police officer, and ultimately a major player in organized crime. Born on October 5, 1925, little is known about his early years, except for the fact that he joined the New South Wales Police Force in 1943 at just 17 years old. Rising through the ranks, he eventually attained the position of Detective Sergeant 3rd Class and was even awarded the Queen's Commendation for brave conduct. But while his police career was progressing, so was his reputation in another area: competitive rowing. Partnering with fellow officer Merv Wood, whom he met in the New South Wales Police Force, Riley and Merv would dominate in the sport, winning gold medals in the doubles at the 1950 and 1954 Commonwealth Games and securing a bronze in the double sculls at the 1956 Olympics. The two police officers shared success on the water, but their careers on land would take dramatically different paths. While Wood continued to climb the ranks, eventually becoming New South Wales Police Commissioner in 1976, Riley was already being drawn into the orbit of corrupt senior officers like Ray Gunner Kelly and Fred Kraher. He soon started associating with members of the criminal underworld, and by the 1960s, major drug investigations had linked Riley to the managers of several illegal gambling casinos in Sydney. Facing disciplinary charges, Riley decided to resign from the police force in February 1962, cutting ties with his law enforcement career just as his criminal associations were solidifying. Years later, his rowing partner Merv Wood stepped down as commissioner in 1979, partly due to the fact that he was getting a lot of flack for his association with Riley. The same year Riley resigned from the police force, he decided to take a job as the sales manager of a poker machine distribution company. Just 4 years later, in 1966, his activities took him across the pond to New Zealand, where he was caught in attempting to bribe a police inspector. His charges stemmed from involvement in drug importation and cashing stolen American Express checks. The scheme unraveled quickly, and Riley was sentenced to a year in prison before being deported back to Australia. Rather than keeping a low profile, he slipped right back into the gambling industry, this time securing a job as a poker machine supervisor at South Sydney Junior Leagues Club in Kingsford. By the time Wally Dean took the reins by becoming president at South Sydney Juniors, he was already well acquainted with Sydney's underworld. Before running the club, he worked as a barber, cutting the hair of some of the city's most notorious underworld figures, including Lenny McPherson. But it wasn't just haircuts Dean was offering. His time-cutting hair built him deep connections, and once he had control of South Juniors and 2 other registered Sydney clubs, those connections turned into opportunities. Apparently, both he and Riley had developed a chain of companies that provided specialized services to licensed clubs across Sydney. The racket worked in 2 ways. Either the clubs were charged grossly inflated prices for basic services, or the companies acted as a front to funnel illegal payments disguised as legitimate business expenses. Riley's official title of poker machine supervisor gave him even more control, allowing him to manipulate the system in multiple clubs from within. He was pulling strings behind the scenes, influencing club leadership, rigging elections, and even attempting to bribe union officials to prevent labor disputes. Despite mounting evidence of corruption, police investigations into South Sydney Juniors painted Riley as nothing more than a savvy operator. However, Justice Athol Moffat wasn't buying it. During his Royal Commission into Organised Crime in Clubs, Moffat pointed out how Riley had been given special treatment, likely because of his past as a well-known police officer and sportsman. When the Royal Commission's inquiry started in 1972, Riley disappeared completely and stayed stayed out of sight until the investigation ended. Then, as if on cue, he reappeared, cruising through the streets of Sydney in his flashy Buick LeSabre, heading to the South Sydney Juniors Club. Banned from the club business, Riley wasted no time finding a new venture, and this time it was drug trafficking. He teamed up with Danny Stein and began working with US mobsters like Jimmy Fratiano of the Los Angeles crime family to set up a trans-Pacific drug network linking Southeast Asia, Australia, and the United States. Around this time, Riley crossed paths with Frank Nugan and Michael Hand, the founders of the infamous Nugan Hand Bank, a financial institution deeply tied to money laundering and the booming drug trade. The bank was a vault of secrets. Clients didn't have names, just numbers. Messages between bank branches were coded, and client records were stripped of anything identifiable. Even mail was sent in plain envelopes with no company name, no return address, nothing that could link it back to Nugan Hand. For drug traffickers, this was a dream come true. Black money flowed in without question, and moving cash overseas was effortless. As organized crime in Sydney became more sophisticated, the bank played a crucial role in handling drug money, and Riley quickly became one of its most valued clients. It's also worth mentioning that when Riley first met Frank Nugan, there were two other men in the room, and they weren't just casual acquaintances. Alongside Frank Nugan sat Harry Wainwright and Duke Countess, two men with ties to Jimmy Fratiano. Law enforcement suspected that the two men were acting as Jimmy Fratiano's representatives, and that Wainwright allegedly played a direct role in bankrolling Riley's operations, funneling cash through his own Nugan Hand account to help keep the smuggling pipeline running. Looking to expand his operations, Riley also formed a partnership with William Sinclair, the founder of Wings Travel. Riley had promised to send business their way, so Sinclair issued him a director's card, giving him access to discounted airfare and hotel rates slashed in half, making international drug trafficking easier and cheaper. Wings Travel soon became a key tool in Riley's toolbox, allowing his drug couriers to move seamlessly between Sydney, Hong Kong, and San Francisco. Riley wasn't the only one who took advantage of the setup. Many suspected smugglers had their tickets arranged through Wings Travel, but when questioned, Sinclair insisted he couldn't possibly vet every passenger. If drug syndicates had chosen to use his agency, then that wasn't his business. In 1976, Riley coordinated multiple heroin shipments into Australia using false bottom suitcases, with the Nugan Hand Bank handling the money transfers from Sydney to Hong Kong. More than 100 pounds of heroin flowed through this network, much of it making its way to his associates in the US. By June 1977, Riley was ready for his biggest job yet, smuggling a massive shipment of Thai cannabis known as Buddha sticks into Australia and the US. Riley had his sights set on something bigger, a massive $50 million payday. With that kind of cash, he had an even bigger dream. He wanted to buy a casino in Las Vegas. To make it happen, he went all in on a huge importation deal, purchasing 5 tons of highly potent cannabis. He built an entire operation, cutting deals with plantation owners, trucking companies, and even securing protection from the Thai military. Back in Australia, he assembled a crew to handle the smuggling, promising them payouts ranging from $500,000 to $2 million each. Everything was set. On March 30th, 1978, the Choya Maru set sail from Bangkok, packed with 2 massive cannabis shipments that were picked up from different coastal regions of Thailand. But things did not go as planned. Mechanical issues forced the crew to dump the cargo into the hull of a wrecked ship in the Solomon Islands. Riley had already poured $750,000 into the operation, and he was not about to let it slip away. He quickly bought a second ship called the Anoa and sent it to recover the stash. What Riley did not know was that 4 law enforcement agencies were already watching. They tracked the Anoa all the way down the Australian coast. When it finally docked in Coffs Harbour, a team of drug squad detectives and federal police were already waiting, ready to bring it all crashing down. Riley was arrested weeks later. When questioned, he gave multiple conflicting accounts of the operation, but the evidence painted a different picture. Investigators knew he had deep connections in the US, ties to gangsters, and alleged mafia members. When pressed about it, Riley had a simple answer. He was just negotiating lobster imports and using their influence over dock workers to get better deals. By the time his trial began, he had a new version of events. An American named John Gilmore had hired him to transport 1.5 tons of cannabis from Thailand, nothing more. If additional drugs were on board, that wasn't his problem. Riley played his cards right. The court labeled him as the middleman, not the mastermind, and he was sentenced to a max of 10 years. While he was in jail, more charges piled up. Investigators dug deeper into his past. By the time the dust settled, Riley was hit with an additional 7-year sentence for possessing an unlicensed pistol, forging a passport application, and conspiring to defraud American Express of $274,000. But prison never kept Riley down for long. In May 1984, after serving less than 6 years of what should have been a 17-year sentence, he was back on the streets, and it didn't take long for him to jump right back into the game. In 1985, he partnered up with Neddy Smith, pilot Peter Johnston, and a few others in a failed plot to fly $40 million of heroin from Thailand over Papua New Guinea. Neddy Smith once wrote that Murray kept coming up with scams worth plenty of money. Not a lot of his scams amounted to anything, hence his nickname, the Prince of Promises. But when one came off, it produced huge earns for one and all. By 1990, he had bigger ambitions and bigger risks. That October, British authorities arrested him for conspiring to defraud British Aerospace of £40 million. He was convicted and sentenced to 5 years, but in December 1991, Riley vanished. He walked out of Spring Hill Prison, a low-security facility in Aylesbury, and went on the run. His next stop was Northern Ireland, where he had contacts with the IRA. Then it was a tour through Spain and Belgium, dodging authorities at every turn. The chase ended 8 weeks later in Essex, where he was recaptured. But Riley wasn't done yet. He was transferred to another minimum security prison in Kent, and in January 1993, he escaped again. By the time he resurfaced, he was in Hong Kong, but the real surprise came in early 1994. He flew straight back to Australia, settling in Queensland under the name Murray Lee Stewart. British authorities considered extraditing him, but in the end, they let it go. A Home Office spokesperson summed it up by saying that bringing him back wasn't worth the cost for a victimless crime. Riley had once again played the system to perfection. Riley passed away a free man at the age of 94 in Queensland in 2020.